She gestured to a technician, who activated a series of holographic displays. Images flashed across the screen, detailed medical scans, intercepted communications, and eyewitness testimonies, all meticulously documented. "These are not fabrications," Thorne said, her voice hardening. "These are the facts. The Kylar Federation has violated the Treaty of Harmony, and it must be held accountable for its crimes." The holographic displays triggered a new wave of murmurs within the chamber. The evidence was damning, but the counselors remained divided. Fear, self-interest, and political maneuvering continued to cloud their judgment. Counselor Grawl, still advocating caution, rose to speak. "Ambassador Thorne," he said, his voice measured and deliberate, "while the evidence is compelling, we must consider the potential consequences of our actions. Sanctions against the Kylar Federation could destabilize the entire region, leading to a full-scale war. Can Earth guarantee the safety of its allies in such a scenario?" Zara Khan bristled. "Are you suggesting that we allow the Kylar to continue their atrocities unchecked, simply to avoid a potential conflict?" she demanded, her voice laced with indignation. "We have a moral obligation to protect the innocent. And what about the potential loss of life if we act rashly?" Grawl countered. "War is never the answer, Ambassador Khan. We must explore all diplomatic avenues before resorting to violence." Counselor Lyra, the seasoned diplomat who had led the initial investigation, chimed in. "I have personally witnessed the Kylar's duplicity," she said, her voice filled with frustration. "They are masters of deception, skilled at manipulating the truth. They will never willingly admit to their crimes. We need to take decisive action." But Counselor Voros, representing a smaller, more vulnerable member world, expressed a different perspective. "My people cannot afford a war with the Kylar," he said, his voice trembling with fear. "We are too weak, too exposed. We need to find a peaceful solution, no matter the cost." The debate continued, a cacophony of voices reflecting the deep divisions within the alliance. Some championed a strong response, demanding immediate sanctions and military action. Others urged caution, fearing the devastating consequences of war. And still others sought to appease the Kylar, hoping to avoid a confrontation at any cost. Anya watched the proceedings with growing despair. The alliance was crumbling, its unity shattered by fear and self-interest. The Kylar were exploiting these divisions, manipulating the counselors like puppets on a string. The pivotal moment arrived when Ambassador Thorne directly addressed Governor Regan. "Governor Regan," she said, her voice calm and unwavering, "you have denied all accusations of illegal experimentation. You have dismissed the evidence as fabricated. But you cannot deny the truth." Regan smirked. "The truth is subjective, Ambassador Thorne," he said, his voice dripping with arrogance. "What you consider an atrocity, we consider progress. The Alliance is blinded by sentimentality, unable to grasp the true potential of scientific advancement." He paused, his gaze fixed on Thorne. "Your Earth customs are quaint. This excessive attachment to offspring, for example. Such sentimentality is inefficient." He sneered. "Children are resources, after all. To be molded, not coddled." A gasp went through the gallery. Marcus gripped Anya's hand, his knuckles white. Zara Khan stood rigidly, her face flushed with anger. Thorne remained impassive. Her voice, when she spoke, was devoid of emotion, yet it resonated with a chilling force. "Governor Regan," she said, her words clipped and precise, "Earth has witnessed brutality before. We have seen the horrors that can be inflicted in the name of progress. And we have learned a valuable lesson: some lines cannot be crossed." She paused, her gaze hardening. "Your Federation has crossed that line. And Earth will not tolerate it." Her words hung in the air, a silent declaration of war. The atmosphere in the chamber shifted, the tension reaching a breaking point. The mud clung to her boots, thick and cloying. The air reeked of decay, of death. Evelyn Thorne, then a young medical student, stumbled through the ravaged village, her heart pounding in her chest. The war had come to her doorstep, bringing with it unimaginable horrors. She had volunteered as a field medic, hoping to alleviate the suffering, to make a difference. But nothing could have prepared her for the reality of the battlefield. The wounded lay scattered amongst the ruins, their bodies broken, their spirits shattered. Children cried for their mothers, their voices lost in the din of explosions. The stench of blood and burning flesh filled the air. She worked tirelessly, patching up wounds, administering pain relief, offering comfort to the dying. But she knew that she couldn't save everyone. The scale of the devastation was overwhelming. She saw things that would haunt her for the rest of her life. A young girl, her legs blown off by a landmine, begging for her mother. An elderly woman, her eyes vacant, staring blankly at the bodies of her family. A soldier, his face burned beyond recognition, whispering a prayer for forgiveness. In that moment, Evelyn Thorne made a vow. She would dedicate her life to preventing such horrors from ever happening again. She would fight for justice, for peace, for the sanctity of human life. The sterile laboratory hummed with the quiet efficiency of scientific progress. But behind the gleaming equipment and the sophisticated data displays lay a dark secret. Evelyn Thorne, now a respected research scientist, had stumbled upon evidence of unethical experimentation. Her colleagues were pushing the boundaries of genetic engineering, blurring the lines between science and morality. They were creating chimeras, human-animal hybrids, designed to be used as weapons. They were experimenting on prisoners of war, subjecting them to cruel and inhumane treatments. Evelyn was horrified. She confronted her colleagues, demanding that they stop their experiments. But they dismissed her concerns, accusing her of being sentimental and naive. They warned her that if she spoke out, she would be silenced. Her career would be ruined. Her life would be in danger. But Evelyn refused to be intimidated. She knew that she had to expose their crimes, no matter the cost. She gathered evidence, documenting their experiments, recording their conversations. She smuggled the information to a human rights organization, risking her own safety to bring the truth to light. The scandal rocked the scientific community. The experiments were shut down, the perpetrators were brought to justice, and Evelyn Thorne became a symbol of courage and integrity. The interrogation room was cold and sterile. The air was thick with tension. Evelyn Thorne, now a human rights activist, sat across from a captured war criminal. He was a high-ranking officer in a rogue nation, responsible for countless atrocities. He had ordered the massacre of civilians, the torture of prisoners, the destruction of entire villages. He sat there, defiant and unrepentant, claiming that he was only following orders. He refused to acknowledge his guilt, to accept responsibility for his actions. Evelyn stared into his eyes, searching for a flicker of remorse. But she saw only coldness, emptiness, a complete lack of empathy. She realized that some people were beyond redemption. Some people were simply evil. And the only way to stop them was to confront them, to hold them accountable for their crimes. Evelyn Thorne left the interrogation room with a heavy heart. She knew that the fight for justice was far from over. The world was still filled with violence and hatred. But she would never give up. She would continue to fight, to speak out, to stand up for what was right. Even if it meant facing overwhelming forces. Back in the present, in the grand hall of the Alliance Council, Evelyn Thorne made her move. Under the guise of adjusting her communication device, she subtly activated a pre-programmed sequence. It was a contingency plan, a failsafe, known only to a handful of trusted individuals within the Earth Alliance. It was called the Intersection. It was a silent command, a series of encoded messages that rippled through the Earth Alliance's communication networks. A delicate dance of digital instructions, rerouting resources, shifting priorities, and preparing the ground for a swift and decisive response. The initial signs were subtle, almost imperceptible to the untrained eye. Encoded messages, cryptic signals, disguised as routine communications, flashed across secure channels, alerting Earth's military and intelligence agencies to the escalating crisis. Redirected resources, crucial materials, including energy, minerals, and medical supplies, were secretly diverted to strategic locations, bolstering Earth's defenses and preparing for potential combat. Organized protests, activists, strategically placed throughout the Alliance, began organizing peaceful protests, demanding justice for the victims of the Kylar's atrocities and pressuring the Council to take stronger action. These protests, while appearing spontaneous, were carefully orchestrated to maximize their impact. Shadow Fleet deployment, Earth's advanced, cloaked naval force, the Umbra Fleet, began mobilizing near the Kylar border, remaining hidden from enemy sensors, ready to strike at a moment's notice. The Umbra Fleet was Earth's best-kept secret, a testament to their technological ingenuity and their commitment to defending their interests. Anya and Marcus, watching from the gallery, noticed the subtle shifts. They saw the technicians adjusting their consoles, the diplomats exchanging furtive glances, the energy readings fluctuating in the background. They knew that something was happening. Something big. "What's going on?" Marcus whispered, his voice filled with concern. Anya shook her head. "I don't know," she said. "But I have a feeling things are about to change." The Alliance Council, still locked in its endless debate, remained oblivious to the storm brewing around them. They were too focused on the political maneuvering, the endless negotiations, to see the real danger. Governor Regan, sensing an opportunity, pressed his advantage. "The Alliance is weak, divided," he sneered. "It is unable to protect its own citizens. The Kylar Federation offers strength, stability. Perhaps some of you would be better off under our protection." His words were a veiled threat, a blatant attempt to intimidate the wavering counselors. Some of them, particularly those representing smaller, more vulnerable worlds, seemed to consider his offer. Zara Khan, her patience finally exhausted, rose to her feet. "Enough!" she shouted, her voice echoing through the chamber. "We will not be bullied. We will not be intimidated. We will not allow the Kylar Federation to dictate the terms of our existence." She turned to the other counselors. "We must stand together," she pleaded. "We must show the Kylar that we will not tolerate their aggression. We must defend the values of the Alliance, the principles of peace, justice, and freedom." Her words resonated with a newfound determination. Some of the counselors, inspired by her courage, began to shift their stance. But it was too late. Commander Forlag, acting on Regan's secret orders, launched his attack. The sirens blared, shattering the illusion of order and civility. The Grand Hall shook as explosions rocked the surrounding buildings. The war had truly begun. The Umbra Fleet emerged from the shadows, its sleek, black ships streaking across the sky, like vengeful spirits. Earth had been preparing for this moment for years, secretly building a fleet capable of taking the fight to the Kylar. The Kylar forces, caught completely off guard, were decimated. Their ships were outgunned, their defenses overwhelmed. On Earth, millions cheered as the news of the initial victories spread. The tide was turning. But the war was far from over. The Kylar Federation was a powerful and ruthless enemy. They would not surrender easily. Evelyn Thorne, watching the unfolding events from a secure bunker beneath Earth's capital, knew that the fight ahead would be long and bloody. But she was determined to see it through to the end. She had witnessed the horrors of war firsthand. She had seen the suffering that the Kylar were capable of inflicting. And she would not rest until they were brought to justice. The echoes of the void were growing louder. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. But Earth was ready to fight. The initial strikes of the Umbra Fleet had bought Earth time, but a conventional war against the Kylar Federation was a battle humanity couldn't win. The Federation's military might was simply too vast, its resources too plentiful. A protracted conflict would bleed the Alliance dry, leaving it vulnerable to total domination. Evelyn Thorne knew this. That was why the activation of the intersection involved more than just military mobilization. It was a multi-pronged strategy designed to attack the Kylar Federation where it was most vulnerable, its control. Earth's counterattack would be silent, insidious, and ultimately, far more devastating than any barrage of missiles. It would be a war fought not with weapons, but with information. A war for the hearts and minds of the Kylar people. The first wave was the information blitz. For centuries, the Kylar Federation had maintained an iron grip on the flow of information. News was carefully curated, dissent was swiftly crushed, and the outside world was portrayed as a dangerous and chaotic place. The Kylar citizenry lived in a state of carefully constructed ignorance, believing that the Federation was the only bulwark against the darkness. The information blitz shattered that illusion. Earth's intelligence agencies, working with a network of hackers, activists, and defectors, launched a massive cyber offensive. They targeted the Kylar's network, bypassing its firewalls and censorship protocols, flooding the system with a torrent of forbidden knowledge. The information was carefully crafted, designed to appeal to the Kylar's sense of logic and reason, while simultaneously appealing to their suppressed emotions. It included damning evidence. The leaked security footage of the illegal experimentation was amplified and distributed across every conceivable platform. Detailed reports, medical records, and eyewitness testimonies were added, painting a horrifying picture of the Federation's cruelty. Financial misdeeds. Information exposing the Federation's corruption. The vast fortunes amassed by the High Council, the misuse of public funds, the exploitation of resources, were exposed for all to see. Military blunders, reports revealing the true cost of the Kylar's conquests. The staggering number of casualties, the depletion of resources, the long-term consequences of the Federation's aggressive policies, all laid bare in stark detail. Alternative histories, accounts of peaceful and prosperous civilizations, demonstrating that there was a viable alternative to the Kylar's doctrine of progress through conquest. Stories of cooperation, innovation, and cultural exchange, showcasing the benefits of a more enlightened approach. The information spread like wildfire, carried by the digital winds of the galactic network. It bypassed the Federation's censors, reaching the minds of ordinary Kylar citizens who had never before been exposed to such ideas. The effect was immediate and profound. Doubt began to creep into the minds of the Kylar people. Questions were asked. Beliefs were challenged. The foundations of the Federation's authority began to crumble. The information blitz was a frontal assault on the Kylar's intellect. The Culture Unleashed campaign was a more subtle and insidious attack on their emotions. For generations, the Kylar Federation had suppressed all forms of artistic expression, deeming them frivolous and unproductive. Art was seen as a distraction from the Federation's goals, a weakness that could lead to dissent and disloyalty. Earth's cultural ambassadors, artists, musicians, and writers began to share their work on underground platforms, bypassing the Federation's control. They offered the Kylar people a glimpse into a world of beauty, creativity, and emotional depth. The offerings included music, uplifting melodies, soulful ballads, and rhythmic beats that resonated with the Kylar's suppressed emotions. Music that spoke of love, loss, hope, and resilience. Art, stunning visual displays, from intricate paintings to breathtaking sculptures, that captured the beauty of the natural world and the complexity of human experience. Art that challenged the Kylar's perception of reality and awakened their aesthetic sensibilities. Literature, powerful stories, from epic sagas to intimate portraits, that explored the themes of freedom, justice, and self-discovery. Stories that inspired empathy, compassion, and a desire for a better world. The Kylar people, starved of artistic expression, embraced Earth's culture with an almost desperate fervor. They shared the music, the art, and the literature, spreading it across the network, infecting the minds of their fellow citizens with a desire for something more. They began to create their own art, expressing their hopes, their fears, and their dreams in secret. They wrote poems, composed songs, and painted murals on hidden walls. They rediscovered the power of art to inspire, to heal, and to transform. The seeds of empathy had been sown. The Information Blitz and the Culture Unleashed campaigns eroded the Kylar's confidence in their leaders. The Civil Disobedience campaign turned that doubt into action. Earth's agents, working discreetly within Kylar settlements, began to encourage peaceful protests and minor acts of sabotage. The goal was not to overthrow the Federation through violence, but to disrupt its operations, to sow seeds of unrest, and to demonstrate the power of collective action. The acts of civil disobedience included peaceful protests. Small groups of Kylar citizens, inspired by Earth's example, began to gather in public squares, holding signs and chanting slogans demanding freedom of expression, an end to the war, and accountability for the Federation's crimes. Work slowdowns. Workers in key industries, such as manufacturing, transportation, and communications, began to slow down their work, deliberately reducing productivity and disrupting the Federation's supply chains. Cyber attacks. Skilled hackers, working anonymously, launched a series of cyber attacks against the Federation's infrastructure, disrupting communications, crippling transportation systems, and exposing sensitive data. Acts of sabotage. Individuals and small groups engaged in minor acts of sabotage, disabling surveillance cameras, cutting communication lines, and defacing propaganda posters. The Federation responded with brutal force, arresting protesters, cracking down on dissent, and tightening its grip on the population. But the more the Federation cracked down, the more the resistance grew. The Kylar people were awakening. They were discovering the power of collective action, the strength of their own convictions. They were beginning to believe that a better world was possible. The information blitz, culture unleashed, and civil disobedience campaigns had weakened the Kylar Federation from within. Now, Earth needed to create a spark, a catalyst that would ignite a full-scale rebellion. That spark came in the form of a group of Kylar veterans. These veterans, hardened by years of combat, had witnessed the true horrors of war. They had seen the senseless violence, the unnecessary suffering, the moral compromises that the Federation demanded of its soldiers. They had begun to question the Federation's motives, its methods, and its ultimate goals. The information blitz had confirmed their worst fears, exposing the Federation's lies and revealing the truth about its crimes. When they were ordered to participate in a particularly brutal crackdown on peaceful protesters, they refused. Led by a grizzled veteran named Commander Rail, they publicly denounced the Federation, declaring their allegiance to the Alliance and calling on their fellow soldiers to join them. "We have served the Federation for too long," Rail declared, his voice broadcast across the galactic network. "We have blindly followed orders, committing atrocities in the name of progress. But no more. We will not be complicit in their crimes. We will not stand by while innocent people are slaughtered. We will fight for justice, for freedom, for a better future." Rail and his followers defected to the Alliance, bringing with them valuable intelligence and a wealth of military experience. Their defection was a major blow to the Federation's morale and a powerful boost to the Alliance's cause. It was the tipping point. Rail's defection ignited a firestorm of rebellion across the Kylar Federation. Riots erupted in cities and settlements, as Kylar citizens took to the streets, demanding an end to the war, the release of political prisoners, and the resignation of the High Council. The Federation's forces struggled to contain the unrest. Soldiers, many of whom were secretly sympathetic to the rebels, hesitated to fire on their own people. The Federation's authority was collapsing. Governor Regan, now desperate, issued a series of draconian decrees, imposing martial law, suspending civil liberties, and ordering the execution of suspected rebels. But his efforts were in vain. The spirit of rebellion had taken root. The Kylar people had tasted freedom, and they were not willing to give it up. Commander Forlag, the Kylar commander overseeing the war against the Alliance, watched the unfolding events with growing fury. He had warned the High Council that the Alliance was a threat, that their soft values and their emphasis on diplomacy would undermine the Federation's authority. But his warnings had been ignored. Now, the chickens had come home to roost. The Alliance's insidious tactics were working. The Kylar people were rebelling. The Federation was crumbling. Forlag knew that he had to act quickly to restore order. He ordered his troops to crush the rebellion with overwhelming force. He unleashed a reign of terror, targeting suspected rebels and their families, executing them without trial. But his brutality only fueled the flames of rebellion. The Kylar people, pushed to the breaking point, rose up in open revolt. They armed themselves with whatever they could find, forming militias and fighting back against the Federation's forces. The war had entered a new and even more chaotic phase. Anya, now deeply involved in the Alliance's intelligence operations, struggled with the ethical implications of their actions. She believed in the cause of freedom, in the need to liberate the Kylar people from the Federation's oppressive rule. But she also recognized the devastating consequences of war. She had seen the suffering, the violence, the destruction that the conflict had wrought. She had heard the cries of the wounded, the pleas of the dying. She knew that war was a terrible thing, even when it was fought for a noble cause. She questioned whether the Alliance's tactics were justified. Were they doing the right thing, or were they simply perpetuating a cycle of violence? Marcus, witnessing her turmoil, tried to offer comfort. "We have to do what we can to stop the Federation," he said. "They are a threat to the entire galaxy. If we don't fight them, they will eventually destroy us all." Anya nodded. She knew that Marcus was right. But the knowledge didn't ease her conscience. She was a scientist, a linguist, a bridge builder. Not a warrior. But the war had forced her to become something else. She was a participant in a conflict that would determine the fate of the galaxy. And she had a responsibility to do everything in her power to ensure that the outcome was just. Earth's silent counterattack was achieving its goals, destabilizing the Kylar Federation and sowing the seeds of rebellion. But the war was far from over. The Federation was still a formidable force, and Commander Forlag was determined to crush the uprising. The Umbra fleet, cloaked and unseen, continued to harass Kylar's shipping lanes, disrupting supply lines and hindering the Federation's war effort. Earth's Special Forces teams, operating covertly behind enemy lines, provided training and support to the rebels, helping them to organize their resistance and to fight more effectively. The war had become a shadow war, a conflict fought in the shadows, where the lines between right and wrong were blurred, and the stakes were higher than ever before. Evelyn Thorne, the architect of this silent revolution, remained steadfast in her commitment to justice. She knew that the path to peace was long and arduous, but she was determined to see it through to the end. The echoes of the void were still present, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked within the galaxy. But Earth, with its unconventional tactics and its unwavering commitment to its values, was offering a glimmer of hope. The fight for the future of the galaxy had just begun. The hollow conference suite aboard the neutral cruiser Serenity felt anything but serene. The air crackled with suppressed animosity as Ambassador Evelyn Thorne sat across from Governor Regan. The hastily arranged summit was the last, desperate attempt to avert total galactic war. Thorne, her face etched with weariness but her eyes burning with resolve, had become a figure of both respect and fear. Her unconventional tactics, her unwavering commitment to justice, and her ability to orchestrate a near-bloodless revolution within the Kylar Federation had earned her a reputation that preceded her. Regan, on the other hand, looked like a cornered animal. The carefully constructed facade of arrogance had crumbled, replaced by a palpable fear. The reports of widespread rebellion, coupled with the defection of Commander Rail and the Umbra fleet's relentless harassment, had shaken the Federation to its core. Between them, the holographic table shimmered, displaying a constant stream of data, reports, and images. A silent testament to the gravity of the situation. "Governor Regan," Thorne began, her voice calm but firm. "The time for denials and obfuscation is over. The evidence against the Kylar Federation is overwhelming. Your crimes against sentient life, your violations of the Treaty of Harmony, can no longer be ignored." She gestured to a holographic projection that displayed a three-dimensional reconstruction of the secret laboratory beneath the research facility. The image rotated slowly, revealing the gruesome details of the Kylar's experiments. "This is irrefutable," Thorne said. "We have medical logs, genetic analyses, and eyewitness testimonies. We know what you have done. And we know why." Regan remained silent, his gaze fixed on the holographic image. The color had drained from his face. "The Kylar people deserve to know the truth," Thorne continued. "They have been lied to, manipulated, and exploited by their leaders for far too long. It is time for them to choose their own destiny." She then presented a proposal that stunned everyone in the room. "The Earth Alliance," Thorne declared, "offers the Kylar Federation a path to redemption. We do not seek conquest or retribution. We seek justice and a lasting peace." Her words were met with disbelief. Regan stared at her, his eyes narrowed. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice laced with suspicion. "A trap?" No, Governor Regan, Thorne replied. It is an opportunity. An opportunity for the Kylar Federation to dismantle its oppressive regime, to embrace the principles of peace and freedom, and to rejoin the galactic community as a respected member. She outlined her proposal. Unconditional surrender. The Kylar Federation must immediately cease all hostilities and unconditionally surrender its military forces to the Alliance. Accountability. The members of the High Council, along with all individuals responsible for war crimes and human rights violations, must be held accountable for their actions. They will be tried before an international court and punished according to galactic law. Democratization. The Kylar Federation must transition to a democratic government based on the principles of freedom, justice, and equality. A temporary governing council, composed of representatives from both the Alliance and the Kylar rebel forces, will oversee the transition. Public referendum. The Kylar people will be given the opportunity to vote on their future. They will decide whether to remain an independent nation, to join the Alliance of Free Worlds, or to forge a new path entirely. Reconstruction aid. The Earth Alliance will provide substantial financial and technical assistance to help rebuild the Kylar Federation, to heal the wounds of war, and to create a prosperous and sustainable future for its people. The proposal was audacious, almost unbelievable. It offered the Kylar Federation a way out of its self-inflicted crisis, a chance to build a better future. But it also demanded a complete and utter surrender of power. Regan struggled to comprehend. He had spent his entire life believing in the Kylar doctrine, in the inevitability of conquest and domination. Now, he was being offered a chance to renounce everything he had ever believed in. News of Thorne's proposal spread rapidly throughout the Kylar Federation. The reaction was mixed. The hardliners, those who still clung to the Kylar doctrine, denounced it as a betrayal. They vowed to fight to the death, to resist the Alliance's control at all costs. But the majority of the Kylar people, weary of war and disillusioned by the Federation's lies, embraced the proposal with hope. They saw it as a chance to escape the cycle of violence, to build a better future for their children. Within the ranks of the Federation's military, the proposal sparked a new wave of defections. Soldiers who had been wavering began to abandon their posts, joining the rebel forces or simply deserting altogether. The Federation's authority was crumbling. Governor Regan, facing mounting pressure from all sides, attempted to rally his remaining supporters. He declared a state of emergency, mobilized the remaining loyal troops, and launched a last-ditch effort to crush the rebellion. He issued a series of propaganda broadcasts, attempting to demonize the Alliance and to portray Thorne as a manipulative puppet. But his efforts were in vain. The Kylar people had seen through his lies. They were no longer willing to be manipulated. The rebel forces, bolstered by the influx of defectors, launched a coordinated offensive, targeting key Federation installations and communication centers. They met with fierce resistance from the remaining loyal troops, but their superior numbers and their unwavering determination eventually prevailed. The fighting was brutal, but it was also swift. Within a matter of days, the rebel forces had seized control of most of the Kylar Federation's territory. Regan and his remaining loyalists retreated to a heavily fortified bunker beneath the capital city. They vowed to fight to the death, to resist the Alliance until the very end. As the rebel forces closed in on the capital, the situation within the bunker became increasingly desperate. Regan, consumed by paranoia and rage, began to turn on his own supporters, accusing them of treachery and disloyalty. The remaining members of the High Council, fearing for their lives, turned on each other, engaging in bitter recriminations and desperate power grabs. The Federation was unraveling from within. Commander Forlag, still loyal to the Kylar doctrine, attempted to launch a counteroffensive, but his efforts were thwarted by the rebel forces and the Umbra fleet. He realized that the war was lost. The Kylar Federation was doomed. In a final act of defiance, Forlag set the Serenity as his final course to ensure the end of both factions. With this, he knew the Kylar would be extinct. The most critical component of Thorne's plan was the public referendum. It was a bold gamble, entrusting the fate of the Kylar people to their own judgment. Months after the surrender, under the watchful eyes of Alliance observers and the newly formed interim government, the Kylar citizens went to the polls. The options were stark: remain independent under a new democratic constitution, join the Alliance of Free Worlds, or attempt to rebuild the old Federation. The campaign was fierce, filled with passionate debates and emotional appeals. The hardliners, though diminished, still wielded influence, spreading fear and misinformation. But the voices of hope and reason drowned them out. In the end, the results were decisive. An overwhelming majority of the Kylar people voted to join the Alliance of Free Worlds. They had chosen a path of peace, cooperation, and shared prosperity. The Kylar Federation, as it had existed for centuries, was no more. Evelyn Thorne stood before the Alliance Council once more, but this time, the atmosphere was vastly different. She was no longer simply the ambassador from Earth, but a symbol of hope, a testament to the power of diplomacy and unconventional warfare. The council chamber erupted in applause as she concluded her report on the Kylar situation. The galaxy had been on the brink of destruction, but Thorne, with her unwavering commitment to her values, had averted disaster. But Thorne felt little joy. The weight of the world rested heavily on her shoulders. She knew that the transition would be long and difficult. The Kylar people would face many challenges in the years to come. She also knew that the threat of violence and oppression would never truly disappear. There would always be those who sought to exploit and control others. The Serenity was discovered adrift in space after the emergency beacon was triggered. What made this more puzzling was the state of it. In the vessel, the crew was nowhere to be seen, but all the life support and life functions were still intact. But as long as there were people willing to fight for justice, for freedom, for the sanctity of human life, there would always be hope. The Kylar situation ignited a firestorm of debate throughout the galaxy. The Alliance Council, newly energized and emboldened by Earth's success, found itself at the center of a profound ethical and political dilemma. The core question: what responsibilities did advanced civilizations have toward developing societies? And when, if ever, was intervention justified? The debate raged across the galactic network, in academic circles, in political forums, and in the homes of ordinary citizens. The arguments were passionate, complex, and often contradictory. The non-interventionists argued that all civilizations had the right to self-determination, regardless of their level of development. Any form of intervention, even with the best of intentions, was a violation of sovereignty and a dangerous precedent. They warned that such actions could lead to cultural imperialism, economic exploitation, and even outright domination. The Prime Directive, often invoked, stated that no outside force could come and introduce themselves into a developing civilization to interfere with their own natural progression. The humanitarian interventionists argued that advanced civilizations had a moral obligation to protect vulnerable populations from oppression and injustice. They believed that the principles of human rights transcended national sovereignty, and that intervention was justified in cases of genocide, slavery, or systematic abuse. They emphasized the importance of protecting the innocent and upholding the values of peace and freedom. The pragmatists advocated a more cautious and nuanced approach. They recognized the potential benefits and risks of intervention, and emphasized the importance of careful planning, multilateral cooperation, and respect for local cultures. They believed that intervention should only be considered as a last resort, and that it should always be guided by the principles of proportionality and accountability. Zara Khan, now a respected elder stateswoman within the Alliance, found herself at the forefront of this debate. She argued passionately for a balanced approach, one that respected the sovereignty of all nations while upholding the principles of human rights. She emphasized the importance of education, diplomacy, and economic development as tools for promoting peace and progress. Anya and Marcus, now recognized experts on Kylar culture and society, contributed their insights to the debate. They warned against imposing Earth's values on other civilizations, and emphasized the importance of understanding and respecting cultural differences. They argued that the best way to promote freedom and justice was to empower local populations, to give them the tools and resources they needed to build a better future for themselves. The Kylar situation sparked the creation of a powerful galactic movement dedicated to protecting the freedom and self-determination of all species. The movement, known as the Galactic Guardians, was composed of activists, intellectuals, and ordinary citizens from across the galaxy. They were united by a shared belief in the principles of peace, justice, and equality. The Galactic Guardians organized protests, launched campaigns, and lobbied governments to promote their agenda. They advocated for stronger international laws to protect human rights, for increased funding for humanitarian aid, and for greater efforts to resolve conflicts peacefully. They also worked to promote cultural exchange and understanding, to break down the barriers that separated different civilizations, and to foster a sense of shared humanity. The Galactic Guardians became a powerful force for change in the galaxy, inspiring hope and driving progress. They reminded everyone that even in a universe filled with conflict, there was always the potential for peace, justice, and freedom. Years later, Evelyn Thorne stood on the balcony of her home on Earth, gazing up at the night sky. The air was crisp and cool, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. The galaxy had changed dramatically since the Kylar crisis. The Alliance was stronger and more united. The Galactic Guardians were a powerful force for good, and the Kylar people were building a new and better future for themselves. But Thorne knew that the work was far from over. There were still injustices in the galaxy, still conflicts raging, still people suffering. She thought of those who had sacrificed so much to achieve peace: Commander Rail, who had risked everything to defect from the Federation; Anya and Marcus, who had tirelessly worked to uncover the truth; Zara Khan, who had tirelessly advocated for justice. She wondered if true peace could ever be achieved. If the echoes of the void would ever truly fade away. As Thorne gazed at the night sky, she noticed something extraordinary. A new star, faint but unmistakable, had appeared in the constellation of Cygnus. It was a symbol of hope, a testament to the power of the human spirit, a reminder that even in a universe filled with conflict, there was always the potential for light to shine through. The new star had no formal name, but among astronomers some referred to it as Thorne's Star. Others called it Hope, or Kylar Reborn. It became a symbol, not only within the Alliance but on Kylar, the light in the darkness they had once been shackled by. The newly recognized species from beyond the rim gave it a new name in their native tongue. Endara, translated meaning the guiding light. The war may have been won, the Kylar integrated, and galactic peace tentatively restored, but the echoes of the void remained. They lingered in the PTSD suffered by soldiers on both sides, in the generational trauma experienced by Kylar citizens, and in the complex moral compromises that had been made along the way. The threat of conflict remained, a constant undercurrent in galactic politics. New power struggles emerged, old rivalries resurfaced, and the temptation to resort to violence was never far beneath the surface. But the lessons of the Kylar crisis had not been forgotten. The galaxy had learned that true power lay not in military might, but in compassion, truth, and a commitment to protecting the vulnerable. It had learned that war could sometimes be won not by force, but by perseverance, wisdom, and moral courage. True power lies in compassion, truth, and a commitment to protecting the vulnerable. It's about empathy and a willingness to cross cultural and ideological boundaries. It's about acknowledging that every sentient being deserves respect and dignity, regardless of their background or beliefs. War can sometimes be won not by force, but by perseverance, wisdom, and moral courage. It's about using diplomacy, intelligence, and cultural understanding as weapons. It's about targeting the enemy's weaknesses, undermining their authority, and inspiring them to choose a better path. Ultimately, it is a message of hope. That even in the darkest of times, even in the face of overwhelming odds, the human spirit can prevail. That even the most entrenched and oppressive regimes can be overthrown. That even a galaxy at the brink of destruction can be saved. By true justice, only then, will true peace follow.